And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the original mothership at coalitionradio.us. Well, anyone who is from the Rhode Island area or virtually any major metropolitan city understands that one of the more exigent parts of our crisis has been, of course, the impact on the business community, and in particular the impact on the small business community, with a special emphasis on retail and a very special emphasis on restaurants. Now, in a state like Rhode Island, where a disproportionate share of the state's income, the state's revenue, the state's economy is based on a tourism focus, a foundation, if you will, and then, of course, add to it the destination nature of Providence and Newport and Cranston and Warwick and Johnston and on and on and on for fine dining, food. Our culinary institutions are truly the bedrock of what we do here in Rhode Island. It's really possibly the last great example of successful free enterprise. Very often successful despite the best efforts of the state government, despite the best efforts of the central planners here. That's, of course, the opinion of station management. We are truly blessed. We have a unique, multicultural population. Literally, we've got individuals, entrepreneurs, and as a result, fine dining from, well, everything to red tablecloth Italian to fine, distinctive Italian dining, to Hmong, to Vietnamese, Peruvian, Jamaican, and on and on and on. In addition to that, we are blessed here in that we celebrate coffee culture. And a lot of that, I believe, has to do with the Italian heritage, if you will, of cities like Providence, where open air, al fresco dining, sitting at cappuccino, we are a coffee community. So when COVID came along and the government decided, if you will, to begin to regulate and micromanage restaurants, the first concern, of course, was finding ways to keep open. And truly, the innovators, the entrepreneurs, the disruptors, if you will, that have given us, through dint of just sheer will at times, this incredible dining community that we have in this state, they found ways to adapt, improvise, and overcome, as the military saying goes. And they did it with panache and flair and a purposefulness that was really an example for the rest of the state. We heard no whining. We heard no kvetching. We didn't see people asking for handouts per se, simply a recognition that which the state effectively broke, that they bore some responsibility in fixing. So we had folks who had been in business in some cases for generations overnight reinvent their business. Somehow they managed in so many cases to take some of the finest dining in America and turn it into takeout. It's unless you've worked in a restaurant, unless you've had family or friends own restaurants, I'm not sure if folks can fully appreciate just the effort and the ingenuity and how they did so. Because, again, we're talking about restaurants and cafes for whom food presentation is an obsession. Simplistic issues to us as consumers, like temperature and if you will, and the combination of foods as they appeared in takeout packaging, means everything to these restaurants. And yet they overcame that. They overcame the pause, the purge, the shutdown, the every single cliche that could be thrown at them to redefine what hours they were open, when they were going to be open, sometimes a few days' notice. At one point, as we entered what we call here at the Coalition the purge, somebody else called it the pause, I called it the purge. Restaurateurs found out with days' notice that they don't get to be open, despite in many cases having invested in countless thousands of dollars of inventory. As we all know, there's only so much you can take home, and I just the most unimaginable circumstances for businesses to somehow not even thrive, not even flourish, but just somehow to survive. Now we face a time when the biggest challenge, if you will, as we gradually reopen, is bringing back together the band. I've had many restaurateurs on this show, and we've tried to give folks an appreciation of the teamwork, the effort, and the personalities, the meshing of said personalities in a restaurant environment, how important that is. This is not something you just grab a bunch of strangers off the street. I mean, folks all obsess about the ability of a quarterback to work with the New England Patriots wide receivers. This is that on steroids. Putting together a great kitchen, and I'm not an expert, but I've been told that it's a combination of personality, skills, training, experience, and sometimes temperament. And somehow there's a chemistry that's created by that. And that's where we're at now. Joining me tonight are two superstars, really, of the Rhode Island restaurant scene. One of them is now officially a repeat offender. That's an honor, by the way. He's appeared now on more than one occasion. And, of course, we're talking about Dave Levesque from Brewed Awakenings. And I've got the pleasure, if you will, of meeting virtually for the very first time in only a matter that 2020, 2021 could bring you, is Brian Kingsford, he, of course, of the Baccaro restaurant. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight, and welcome to the Coalition.
That's our pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So, give us a little bit of a quick taste of both of your establishments. They're both very different, but at the same time, they both occupy the highest reaches of their respective markets. Brian, we haven't had a chance to talk before. Tell us about Baccaro and a little bit of its history and how you folks are doing right now.
Well, Baccaro's running. We're 14 years old now, right about now, actually, going into our 15th year, and we've been running well. Obviously, any restaurant that can withstand, 3 to 5 years is doing well. But 15 years in, we're feeling pretty good, but the time right now, this is very, very challenging. And what's very interesting is, speaking with Dave Levesque and a bunch of others, it doesn't even matter, as you just mentioned, the two different platforms. Here we have Baccaro as a white tablecloth, fine dining establishment, 15 chefs on the line,
Wow.
47 employees, pushing along. And then you got Dave's style in his coffee shops and his great operations, and yet we have the exact same problems, that we're facing. We when we talk to each other, it's like talking in the mirror.
Right.
It's amazing, the conversations, how they go back and forth. We could just finish each other's sentences on this stuff.
Mm-hmm. How important, am I overstating the importance of the chemistry of the people working together and the team that, over a 13 or 14, 15-year period, the importance of the teams that you've built?
Yeah, no, it's a dance. I mean, this is a composed dance. This is something that takes a very, very long time to get right. It's one of those things that if you canceled a Broadway show or a production and tried to put all new actors up there or new performers up there to do the job, it's never going to come off right without lots and lots of practice and understanding that chemistry that goes between one another. When you watch the line cook on any given night, it really is a dance. People move symbiotically and in a way that just is innate. They kind of glide through and past each other, and it moves in a way that you can't just teach to somebody. It takes time to get it there. And one of the positive sides for Baccaro is that we kept every employee that we had from day,
Wow.
From not from day one, but from the beginning of this nightmare. We've been able to retain all of our employees. And it wasn't easy to do. That was prior. We were doing that prior to help with PPP and all that other stuff. We just knew it was an important thing to do, that we maintained those employees. But at the same time, right around March 1st of 2020, we signed a lease to build a new restaurant and started building it. And within a couple of weeks, found out that this was all hitting. So we're about 80% through the construction of that, but facing a problem in the same sense that we're not going to get labor. It doesn't matter if they open the economies up, if they keep increasing dining room percentages and all this other stuff. We're not going to be able to move because we can't get people to come in and actually fulfill the jobs, train into the jobs, and do the jobs.
Now, Dave, why don't you jump in? Folks who've listened to the show before are familiar with Brood, but give us the same type of snapshot in terms of teamwork. Again, very different style dining establishments, but both not only just pursuing but occupying really the very high end of each one's respective business model. We've talked about the fact that you bring young people in. But how many? Very often, I mean, is there a way to estimate how long it takes to train someone at a facilities like yours so that they can work a few of the tasks? They can be a barista. They can wait. They can do all the things necessary to move a sophisticated yet high volume operation. How long does it take?
Well, like Brian well stated. I mimic. We have the same exact problems, but it can take weeks. It can take months, depending on the individual, depending on the positions you're training them. Are they going to do one thing, just work a register? Or are they going to be running the coffee machines? Or are they going to jump in back and do food prep? Or are they going to be making sandwiches and cooking and stuff like that? So obviously, what we do is a less of a skill than what you're going to see in his restaurant. More quick paced, fast in and out. But it's the same problem. If you don't have people working for you that are there consistently for a long period of time, you can't put out the product in a timely manner as you're normally able to do. And our biggest problem now is we can't even get people to come in the door. We can't get people to work. Right. You got the federal government paying people to stay home. So that was the reason we kind of got together and started talking about putting a bill to say, how do we get people out of unemployment and back into the workforce in a way that encourages them to do that, and so they can start building their career as a nice, good job creation bill.
Right. Now, I just want to remark that despite the incredible array of styles of restaurants, the incredible amount of people in a state this small that are employed in everything from fine dining to fast casual, I guess is the term is, you're all very close. It is a very small community, isn't it? I mean, a number of operators, a lot of you are on a first-name basis, sometimes probably just for to vent to or to challenge or to coalesce with. But how tight is the business community in Rhode Island as far as restaurants go?
Well, I'll say it's real tight. I mean, I spend time with all sorts of restaurant people. Whether it just be a casual conversation or an email or working over an issue or problem to, visiting restaurants, talking to people, working out the same problems. And, I have to say in the last week and a half, I've probably been to 17 or 18 different restaurants during the day, later in the day, discussing these problems. So, yeah, it's pretty close fit. And then you have people that you're there working at one particular restaurant, you leave later to go see your buddies at another restaurant or vice versa. So it's pretty close-knit. During this whole COVID pandemic that's been going on, we met at places at Parkside and different places, Cello's restaurant, in the cloak of darkness when no one was supposed to get together and start talking about our issues and concerns and what we're going to do. And sometimes I think Brian can say we probably had 125, 130 people show up to one of our meetings to discuss some of these issues. And from restaurants, from, a sandwich maker all the way up to a fine dining establishment like Brian has.
Right. And that's remarkable because the level of competition, both just on a business basis in terms of competing for sometimes a very challenged Rhode Island entertainment dollar. And then there's also the competition for, just out of sheer pride, craftsmanship, for the organizations so disparate to coalesce like this at a time of great need, I think really speaks to the strength of the Rhode Island business community. And it's in this spirit, Dave, that you've come up with this plan that we elaborated on the website. What was this something that a group of you guys just had a eureka moment in the middle of the night? Dave, what was the inspiration? And then let's talk about the plan itself.
Well, a lot of it started, things like this have been talked about for a long time. How do we get people off unemployment and back to work? But a lot of it started with the first group meetings we had talking about when people are on unemployment, how do we get them off? And then people at one time were paid an enormous amount of money during this pandemic from the federal government. Well, when it happened again this time, it was even more of a shock because restaurants are trying to get back open. get back to business. You need to staff more. Like Brian was trying to open up another location. We were trying to rebuild a location. We were trying to open up another. We did open up another one in Joe Palino's building on 100 Westminster Street, and we just couldn't find people. They weren't around. So the more restaurants I talked to, whether it be Brian, Cafe Novo, Dimitri, or the Cello brothers and sons and kids, Jared Cello, from one restaurant to another restaurant, every single person was having the same problem. Couldn't get people to come in because we're paying them to stay home. So that's when I stepped back and said, listen, we got to do something. We got to somehow get the state of Rhode Island to assist us and go to the state first, because it takes forever to get the federal government to do it, to assist us and pay people to come back to work. And that's where I sat down, came up with a little idea, proposed it to Joe Shikachi, who's now the Speaker of the House. He said if you put something together that makes sense, he would do what he could to get it heard so we can see where we can stand. And that's how it started. And then I ran it by a bunch of other restaurant people. People liked it. We worked the tweaks. Attorney Josh Teverow helped me clean the bill up, make it look a little bit more legible. And we worked through it. And this week I presented it to Joe Shikachi, the Speaker. Senator Frank Lombardi read it, said he immediately wanted to be the sponsor. He's the sponsor of the bill on the Senate side. And now we have Barbara Ann Fung, who will be the sponsor on the House side to put it through. And we're fast tracking it. And that's kind of what it is. And I'll be ready to tell you what a little bit's about if you ask.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the important part here is we've got time to get this done this session. This is your timing was prohibitive because folks, the sausage is made and it's made in a fairly compact period of time. And once you reach sort of this breaking point, it's difficult to introduce legislation, get it heard through the various committees. But my spidey sense in this case tells me that this is an all hands on deck moment where folks are going to, you think about Live Aid years ago, and to date myself, but what was it? Check your egos at the door. Well, certainly the restaurant owners have done just that. They've looked and tried to create a community response to this exigent crisis. Now it's up for our legislature to do it. So, Dave, without further ado, let's lead us through this and show us how this can work. And then maybe Brian, if you want to jump in with examples of how it can help you in a fine dining environment.
Sure. So the way the bill works is that right now somebody on unemployment, and let's take a basic minimum wage employee right now, and we'll use some general numbers, gets about 60% of what they would have made if they worked full time. So on a $460 salary or wage, they would take home about $276 on unemployment. Then the Fed kicks in another $300. That employee now gets $576 to stay home, not even go to work. So they're now making more than they would have been before at a minimum wage job. So what I proposed is that Brian hires somebody back, brings them back to Pecora Restaurant, even if it was a minimum wage employee. Never mind, people get paid much more than that, depending on the jobs and position, talents, and knowledge. Mm-hmm. Well, we'll stick to this number for the sake of this discussion. He brings them back. They got the minimum $460 base pay each week for a 13-week period. The state of Rhode Island will kick back a $150 check to the employee as long as they work for Brian at his restaurant for a week. If that employee stays for a 13-week time period, the state of Rhode Island will kick in another $150 combined, which would be $1,950 at the end of the 13 weeks. So essentially, during the time that employee works for Pecora Restaurant, they will make $610 at minimum per week. And at the end of the 13 weeks, if they stay employed and don't quit, paperwork gets filed, the state of Rhode Island cuts that employee another check for $1,950. In essence, that employee a minimum wage employee, will make at least $760 a week during that 13-week time period. Now, what does that do? That lets us get through this whole part of the summer season into when all the tourists are coming in, restaurants are opening, the weather's kicking in, the pandemic's starting to die down. It allows the restaurants to put the workers in place in order to keep their business alive and survive. Two, it also allows an employee the opportunity to learn a skill, to move up at a job, to decide whether they want to stay at that job or move to another one. And an employee would be able to transfer from one store or one restaurant or one job. And this does not only apply to restaurants. This bill that I wrote applies to all businesses, but we're focusing on restaurants, and that's how I wrote it. So an employee after the 13 weeks can choose to stay on or move to another restaurant that they're happy with, or another job that they happen to be with. So after the 13 weeks, instead of making 576, that employee makes 760. That's about $180 additional, somewhere around $2,300 for that 13-week time period. Now, here's the benefit. The state of Rhode Island generates tax revenue by the employee going back to work. The money that they're going to pay out to the employee for working is now at a value instead of paying someone to sit home, which we don't get a value for.
Right.
And if that employee stays employed, then the state of Rhode Island sees a big windfall because now they don't have to pay that employee on unemployment. So it ends up being a job creation bill. It ends up getting people out of an area where they're stuck.
It's brilliant. It works. I was just going to say it on an editorial note. One of the reasons why it's brilliant and it works is because it's been designed, worked for, analyzed by people who actually, as a major part of their lives, create wealth, create jobs, create opportunities. That whole practical sense that you fellas have sure does come in handy, as they say. And if this works in the manner in which I think it does, I think not only will it solve a potential, highly challenging dilemma, but it also will hearken to perhaps a new era, especially under the McKee administration, who is more business sensitive, of cooperation between, as they say in civic life, stakeholders and those who would govern us. That's a key ingredient, from my perspective, that's been missing in a lot of the solutions to this crisis. What are your fellows' reactions to that?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say though, like Dave's this idea that Dave is proposing, what is really wonderful. Yes, it fixes a problem, but it also has the solution for the state as well. It helps fix the state. The competition, Pat, that you mentioned earlier, that's real. And competition amongst businesses is good. That drives the economy. Competing for employment is good. It allows people to progress and move on from job to job to excel or better themselves. But when our competitor is the state of Rhode Island and the U.S. government, there's no way we can compete with that. And that's what we're finding right now, is that it's these restaurants against the government, and the government is paying more money than we ever could to be sustainable. And what Dave is proposing here, not only does it fix the problem, it saves the state money. In the end, it actually is more affordable, and it fixes it long term. So it's an incentivization program that incentivizes to work, not to stay home, and that's what we kind of need to do.
And hasn't that been the issue all along? Ultimately, in terms of wage growth, which so many, if you will, so many different types of organizations clamor for, when you have growth in the economy, when you have additional competition for the labor base, which can be supported by the additional revenues generated, that's when you have native growth. That's organic growth. That's not created by a government transfer payment. I often point out, and I'm sure you gentlemen have friends, compatriots, or maybe even active business interests in cities like Boston, and even at the depths of the if you will, I'll call it the COVID recession, if there was still so much business and so much competition and so much activity that if you attempted to pay someone $8 or $9 an hour, you simply, or 10 or even 11 or 12, you simply wouldn't find any employees. Employees benefit in cities like Boston because the business base exhibits real growth, real success, and as a result, real demand for skilled individuals. I don't know in the 30 or so years that I've lived here if I've seen that in a very long time here. It's how can we take this example and, if you will, get government to acknowledge that they need your skills in quote unquote helping to build the economy? Is that possible as a result of this?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
I mean, if we look at what's needed in Rhode Island, we need jobs, right? So we got some they say 2,900 restaurants / eating, drinking establishments in Rhode Island. Well, if everybody hired 2 people, we'd put some 5,800 people back to work. Just during this program that I put together during the 13 weeks, even though the state of Rhode Island would still be paying out $300 per employee per week, the state would save at least $788,000 based on my quick calculations.
Right.
Never mind what they're going to save after they don't pay people the 300. It's into the millions a week. Never mind, hundreds of thousands. At the same point, to put 5,800 people back to work is extremely easy. I'm not sure what Brian's number is, but I could hire 30 full-time people tomorrow, and I probably would still need more. I talked to the people at Cello's, and they're double my numbers. I talked to Cafe New Orville. They need a lot of people. Ballards out on Block Island probably could hire 20 people tomorrow. We're talking restaurants, not 1 or 2 or 3, and they're not all minimum wage positions. Some of them are managers. Some of them are chefs. They're assistant managers. There's maintenance people. There are dishwashers. There are busboys. There are prep cooks. There are baristas. There's every single position you could possibly imagine. And no one's walking out of any of these restaurants or positions at making minimum wage.
Right. 1,
we offer people more. 2, you got a whole tip component that's part of it where people can generate 4, 5, 6, 10, 20, $30 an hour, depending on the store or the position they go to work for. So you could really take the Rhode Island unemployment right now, which is at 7.3% that they state. I think it's probably closer to 8 or higher. The national average is 6.2. And just with this bill, if just restaurants take 6,000 plus people off of unemployment and put them back to work, we would already be at the national level for unemployment instead of being almost 2 points higher.
Brian, speak to the type of can you speak to the type of career growth that can take place in a restaurant like yours? I mean, particularly if you get a young person in who may not have a lot of skills yet, they're perhaps just out of high school. What type of career pattern can they take in an organization like yours, which is so focused on fine dining?
So, Pat, we have a lot of levels of entry all the way up. We actually prefer, we're an accredited institution in a sense where we work directly with the culinary, with Johnson and Wales, CIA. We do internships. We have students that are on internship here now that then move up to being hired by the end of their internship or whatnot. We try to retain, which we've been lucky enough to do to keep our role going. But we have children. We work at a level of, like, we have kids with working papers, 16 years old, that we enter in as food runners just to show them the operation, to see what's going on. We did programs with some of the charter schools. We did stuff in the high school level to try to give kids somewhere to go, to get off the streets, something to do, to kind of learn a skill set, be around other employees, just to learn the basics of having a job, which is kind of funny because we find ourselves now looking to them to see if we can get them to come on and teach them to cook at an earlier age, because we don't have anybody else. There's nobody that can come in with skill set to cook. So now we're trying to train and teach kids at a younger age that can handle some of it to do so. But let's just go back to it. The kids that come in as a food runner, let's say they were 17 years old and they work as a food runner for a little while. They may progress up to a back server. So they come in, they're not at minimum wage. They're probably somewhere around $14 an hour with the tips. But they move to back server and they're up to $18 an hour. They move up to server itself, and they're up in the $28 an hour to $32 an hour, depending on the given night. And that's a huge jump for some of these guys. And it happens all the time. It's amazing how they go or progress from being a 17-year-old on our front lines just running food to all of a sudden dressed, with pressed clothing and polished shoes and discussing wine out at a table. They amaze themselves and they make a great paycheck doing so. Then there's also another turn that they might not go to the floor, but they might actually progress into the kitchen, and that works as well. The big problem with the kitchen at Baccaro is it is a real decision. It's it's a 40-hour-a-week commitment. You're going to get in there and you're going to work hard, and some of the the kids with school, it's a little tough, but there are some that do that too. Beyond that, we've hired young people that came in from Johnson & Wales just out of school, that came in as line cooks, that are now running this restaurant. I mean, we have basically, as I'm the executive chef and owner of the restaurant, I write the menus. My partner Jennifer handles the front of the house. She does the wine lists and that side of the general managing side. But under us, we have sous chefs. I have two. Well, right now we have 3 sous chefs because of the new restaurant. We're trying to. That's one of the reasons we were opening it, is to kind of thin the herd and get this spread our talent across the 2 locations, because some of the people have been with us so long that they're at the point where they need to run their kitchens and whatnot. So we wanted to give them that opportunity. So we have 3 sous chefs. We have 3 lead line cooks that are under them, which are basically, we could even define them as executive sous to down to sous, that are making, really good career money here. And then you have your line cooks under that, and it's a great hierarchy and a great place to learn. It's a really interesting operation, because people will walk in here not knowing the difference between a red wine and a white wine, and walk out of here knowing, vintages and estates and, territories and whatnot for wines, and say, oh my God, or the 32 different cured meats that we're serving out of our Salumeria, or the cheeses from the different regions of Italy.
Wow.
It's a real learning experience for people, and it gives them a good sense of pride and understanding to realize that they can then grow in here and learn that. So it really is a broad spectrum. They can come in. We don't have anybody really at minimum wage, but at the same time, the minimum wage jobs are very important in Rhode Island, from what I can see, because it's an entry level. It's a way to give the younger generation that's entering into certain places job ethic and etiquette. It's a very important part of it, but the unemployment side of it has always been, as David explained, it really broken. It's really a problem. People would rather stay home sometimes than work, especially if you're going to pay them more than we can pay them.
Right.
Even if we can match it, even if I was talking about this with David the other day. He said, even if we could match this salary, to some of the younger kids, they're 24 years old, whatever, we're going to match what they're taking home in unemployment, but, match it, or sit at home on the beach all year and get paid all summer and get paid. I mean, that's where we're at. And it's a really tough thing to compete with. Right.
Because the overwhelming ethos, if you will, in Rhode Island is that there are constant attempts by government. And again, I'm going to play the political guy in this conversation. You gentlemen, your life's work is to make great food and great beverages. From my perspective as someone who's political, it seems like there's a constant emphasis by the government to, in effect, replace on so many different levels that which can be offered by what we call here the dreaded private sector. And to your point, folks who may not be familiar with great restaurants. There was a gentleman. He made the papers today because he just celebrated his 50th anniversary with Twin Oaks, and my wife's uncle they're all and their family, they're all French, and great waiters. I mean, that's a profession in many parts of the world. It's not just something casual to be taken up in between gigs. It's a lifelong. It's an art form. It's a skill. And that's and generational wealth can be developed by it. Folks can use that as a platform to work with other people in opening up their own restaurants and businesses as a result of that exposure to the restaurant world. And we're so blessed here in Rhode Island because we have so much variety, so much opportunity here, that it's frustrating that we're not putting our kids, our young folks, the youths, if you will, in a position to take advantage of that. I've traveled a lot. There's a lot of places in this country, wonderful people, great scenery, but you're not going to get a Baccaro, you're not going to get a Brood, you're not going to get you're not going to find fine Peruvian dining on the menu, and you're not going to be able to go right down the street and get great Thai either. Listen, this is outstanding, Dave. Let's run through it one more time to leave folks with a taste of what this can do, and then we'll talk about a way to how to follow this up and create some public support for this.
Sure. So once again, the way it will run is that an employee or somebody that's unemployed will be able to sign up for a job in any industry, and as long as they keep that job each week, they would receive a $150 check in addition to whatever pay that they negotiated or earned during their employment at that company. Mm-hmm. So it would escalate even the lowest paid position all the way up to about $610 per week. And if they commit to the 13 weeks and follow through, they'd get an additional check for another $1,950, which is equal to another $150 a week. And then hopefully by that time, they've established a foothold or a setting as to what they want to do. Do they like that job? And you're moving forward. So it's a true job creation bill to get people off unemployment. But let me paint one more picture that it's not the end all and it's not going to save everything. What we also need is the state to do its part, not to let people just sit and collect for no good reason. Once again, the unemployment should be there as a real safety net for those that do lose their job, like when the pandemic hit, or if a business goes out of business, or for whatever reason, if somebody can't work. But it shouldn't be a cradle just to allow people to stay on unemployment because they say they can't get a job. Brian can tell you, and he told me a great story, and I got some of the same. We've had hundreds of applications come in, and people just don't show up afterwards, or they work for a day and then they leave, or they say they're going to come in, they don't even come in for the interview, and they're continuing to collect because the process is broke. There's not that backing up of the State Department saying, or the state of Rhode Island saying, hey, you need to get off unemployment. There are jobs out there. And right. For those people who can work, they should be required and forced to go back to work instead of staying home. So it's truly a job creation bill, but it's going to take the state to push on the other side to say, we got a bunch of people collecting and they can go back to work.
Absolutely. Right, I'm sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly the point, because everybody that seems to have gotten onto payroll now, it was done, because of, not onto payroll, but onto unemployment, was forced through COVID. And that's kind of a different scenario than the norm. You lose a job, there are rules as to how you can collect unemployment and why, if you got fired for cause, fired not for cause, there are a lot of rules to get onto unemployment that get checked. But with COVID, it was an automatic. If you put COVID down, it's like a no questions asked, you're on unemployment. The only problem is the state doesn't seem to have figured out, or didn't seem to think about, how do I get them off of unemployment
right
at that point? And they put the task of that onto the employee to basically say, I'm out looking for a job, but no one's hiring, or I can't get anything. Well, that's just simply not true. They're filling out these applications online through all these different online platforms for jobs, but they're not showing up for the interviews. I had 2 people show up out of almost 45 back and forth discussions for an interview, whereas we set dates and times. 2 showed up, and and it was amazing. And I said, this is the problem. They're not doing this for any other reason but to say to unemployment, if asked, see, look, I applied, but I didn't get the job. There's no checks and balance system. So what Dave's plan is really discussing here is an end game as far as that goes. These people join our restaurant under his plan. They're incentivized at the front, they're incentivized at the back, but even more so at the end of the 13 weeks, they're employed, and they can't just walk away from that job. If they do, they do not qualify for unemployment. So it actually fixes that little bit of a situation there as to how do we get them off unemployment. This is one of the ways to get them off so that they can get real numbers, because the numbers that they're giving stimulus on are not actually real numbers. The economy is opening up, but even the restaurant world has been extremely busy with a lot of the takeout situation. It's taken more labor for that, and we just can't get the employees in to do it, to do the work. So there has to be a way, once on unemployment, to get them off unemployment, and that's where we're really kind of stuck. And that's where this bill could actually help the state out and get the people, back onto a job, and then back into the parameters that already existed, which was you don't just walk away from a job and collect unemployment. That doesn't work. You can't do that.
Right. I think everyone in this room is old enough to remember a time. I was on unemployment once for about 3 or 4 weeks, a long time ago, and you had the card. And you had to get the card signed off on, and you had to actually show up for the interview. And back then it was on the honor method, but a lot of places wouldn't just sign that card to give you a free ride. And I'm not, listen, I'm not diminishing the challenge people are facing. Particularly early on, there was a lot of confusion about how communicable this was. And of course, you're dealing with the public. I got a sore left arm right now from yesterday, and things like vaccinations are available. And I think we're seeing the tail end of this, but we can't create a mentality or the acknowledgement that somehow there's a free ride out there, because again, that just places more pressure on the government to place more pressure on folks like you. And as Dave mentioned too, folks, this is not just for the restaurants. I mean, we're focusing on restaurants because that's where we're at critical mass right now. We're getting ready for the summer season. Things are reopening. There's some wonderful holidays coming up that we're going to celebrate all together. Mother's Day, Father's Day, July 4th. And we want to do that in style with our friends in the restaurant business who've been there for us for generations. I don't want to see any more obituaries, if you will, business obituaries. It breaks my heart to see that, because having been self-employed a good part of my life, I understand the sweat equity and the stress and the work that you gentlemen have put in. I can't even account that I've even done a fraction of what you guys have done. So first of all, congratulations just for being there, for employing people, for creating wealth, for creating a quality of life for Rhode Islanders that, I often say we need to get a couple of busloads of people once a year and take them somewhere else. And so they don't understand that they don't have 30 varieties of fish and chips to compete for on a Friday night. And there aren't, literally a couple of dozen fine nationally ranked white tablecloth Italian dining. It doesn't happen. You don't have places where, like say the folks down in South County who are doing literally their own aquaculture. Their oyster beds are literally at Matunic right outside. That doesn't exist in the rest of the world, and I don't want to lose it here. So it's a special time, and it's a special place, and as Rhode Islanders, it's great to see folks working together like this. So congratulations. We always end up every show with what I call shameless self-promotion. So, guys, Brian, why don't you go first? Tell folks again about Baccaro. Everybody's heard of it, but just what you guys are doing right now in terms of your focus on the menu and why they need to get there, tomorrow.
Baccaro is always focused on local indigenous ingredient. It's simplicity, but the complexity in it can never be overlooked. We cook from the farms right to the table, and I guess that term is kind of cliche, but we've been doing that. Oh God, I've been cooking that way for 30 years, and it's the best way to cook. So you'll always, if you go up to Kingsford Farms, and you'll see our trucks up there. We go out in the fields, we harvest our own, we pull our own stuff in, and we create menus very regularly based off of whatever it is that we're pulling in. We change the menus, not daily, but very, very often. It's definitely a different style of restaurant in Rhode Island, and people tend to find it very enjoyable. We're on South Water Street down on the riverfront of Providence. Really nice location. We have our own private parking lot that's attached to the building, and Tuesday through Saturday nights. Give us a try.
Absolutely. And Dave, bring us up to date on Brood. How are things, and what are you guys working on?
Well, we've been around, as you know, I think a little over 24, 25 years. We've recently opened up our newest store in Joe Palino's building, 100 Westminster Street. It's closed right now because of the pandemic and the city was shut down. We're going to hopefully reopen that very soon. So that keeps us at 5 locations. We're a quick, casual, fast, in and out coffee shop, lunch place, drive-through service at multiple locations. We've expanded our menu over the years. Now we're doing much more cooking in the kitchen and less just putting sandwiches and drinks together. But at the same point, we added a liquor component to multiple stores. So you can go in and get a glass of wine or an espresso martini. Johnston, our flagship, or I should say our original location, which has been there for 24 years, now has an entertainment license. So, you could have music coming up, Tribeca this coming week, comedy shows that we've done, over the past, few years. So we're still that hometown, take your family out to go have a bite to eat, a breakfast sandwich, a lunch, business for someone to go sit down, close a business deal, student to study. It's it's truly a place where people gather and can have conversation, but also have a good bite to eat, a good drink, compete in the coffee and frozen beverage market and in lunch business. And the plan for us is to continue to grow them. We're looking for more locations, but the big problem now is employees, and without them, we cannot grow. So hopefully we can get this bill passed and get DLT and the state to work on their side of enforcement, and that's it. So yeah, come visit us. And listen, there's a whole slew of restaurants out there where everybody really needs the support now, more than ever before. They got this big $2 trillion bill that came out. It's not going to apply for most restaurants. None of that $2 trillion bill coming out now really applies for us. So, and a lot of the other restaurants that are out. So we really need people to come out and support all of us. So that's it. That's our pitch.
And finally, the two legislators who have agreed to sponsor your bill, folks need to reach out to them politely and say, just a quick message, say, hey, listen, we really appreciate you working with the folks in the restaurant community. We really appreciate, pump their air a little bit. I mean, these guys take a beating a lot. And, their willingness to sit down and as the late, great Vincent A. Buddy Cianci would have said, come Coco on something like this, I think speaks the world. So the two gentlemen that folks should reach out to initially.
Yeah, well, Senator Frank Lombardi is on the Senate side. He's the sponsor. And then Barbara Ann Fong, representative, she's on the House side. And Joe Shikachi is helping us make sure this bill gets heard. It's already in play. They're already doing what they got to do on their side to write it. So it's being fast-tracked. But it's not only reaching out to them, it's reach out to any political person that you have a connection to. And it doesn't matter what town or what community, and share this copy of the bill that we put together right now, get in there, support it. But when it comes time, I'm going to tell you one of the big problems that we have here in Rhode Island, and the Speaker, Joe Shikachi, tells me this all the time. And it's hard. Brian and myself, we're running a business. We don't have a lot of free time. But we got to make more time to get up there and speak on behalf of these bills and the things that are going on for our state. Because if we don't, the opportunity gets missed. So a lot of times things get passed to go through because we're not up there speaking. So we got to try to find more people within our business and our community to get out there and do that so that we can sometimes overcome or change some of the direction of some of these bills that are going out there.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, thank you again for spending time. I know how busy you are. I know how sometimes family time can be a challenge. This is a very important weekend for a number of our religious friends, whether you're, follow the Christian tradition or the Jewish tradition. So I know you guys are hopefully going to have a great Sunday, both business-wise and family. And again, thanks for diving in there. What you folks do in terms of being at the top of the economic ladder has impact and is felt throughout the entire state. From my good friend John Zambato, who makes Yacht Club sodas, to the folks who are delivering victuals, meats, and produce. It's everybody in Rhode Island has the potential to be impacted by this legislation. It's that important. Folks, you've been listening to the Coalition. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. Folks, if you're here this week or tonight for the very first time, we just ask you to give us a like, a share, a follow, a subscription, whatever. Social media for independent media is, in fact, our lifeblood. It allows us to do programming like this and to raise our voice above sort of the crazy noise that goes on in the crazy media landscape of today. Folks, have a wonderful night, and we'll be back.